Hey there, I'm Jaya.
And I'm Ian.
And we have been doing a 52-week YouTube sex life and makeover challenge, helping you to make over your sex life. And we've been doing a segment on 7 barriers to passion and pleasure. If you haven't seen all the previous segments, please go back and watch 1 through 6, because this is the 7th barrier. And what is our 7th barrier? Well, it's shame, trauma, and pain. So I want to do the definition of shame. And Brene Brown has a great quote, which is, shame is when you say to yourself, I am bad. And I think that's a really important thing. I am bad. Versus guilt, which is when you say what I did was bad, wrong, whatever. And so I think it's really important to distinguish between, are you in shame or are you in guilt around your sexuality? Almost all of us have shame. I still have shame that comes up when it comes to my sexuality. So I'm honestly checking in, is it shame or is it guilt? What I did was bad, or am I actually bad? And a lot of times it's guilt. And it's good to check in because you deal with them differently. I want to read my definition of sexual shame. So sexual shame is a state of mind that prevents you from enjoying pleasure and aliveness in your life because it says to you that you are a bad person for enjoying sex. Shame keeps you locked in fear and in a pattern where you cannot fully express your sexual needs, wants, and desires.
So how many people are locked in that box?
Yeah.
That's unfriendly. I got like a...
It just feels... And then trauma is when we're experiencing something in our past. It could even be something that's happening in the moment, but trauma is something usually from the past where it's like a scar or a mark on our sexuality. So trauma could be unwanted sex. Trauma could be a bad exam. I mean, how many of you have had a bad pelvic exam? That can equate to trauma in the body, and our body stores that trauma. It's not just emotional trauma, but it can be physically stored as well, the emotional and physical scars.
It can be verbal trauma, right? I mean, the way you're spoken to as a child or spoken to about sex.
Yeah. You know, I got a lot of "you're a little whore." You know, that could be that's something that I could have taken on and did at one point in my life, was that shame and trauma from that. And then there's the pain. So that could be pain during sex because your body freezes up because you're in the trauma. That could be pain from scar tissue. And a lot of people don't look at scar tissue. I spent years researching scar tissue with a woman named Ellen Heed, where we really looked at how scar tissue is affecting sexuality and how to overcome that scar tissue that's in the body. And scar tissue can be caused by all kinds of things: rough sex, inflammation, infection, episiotomy. That's when they cut when you have a baby.
And it's
tears.
healable.
It's all healable. That's the good news. The good news is that it's all healable. So what do we do? How do we heal the shame and the trauma and the pain? That's, again, a huge conversation. We could do a whole 52 weeks on that, but let's give them a couple little tips.
Well, one thing would be empathy. Always approach these topics with empathy for yourself, for the internal feelings, because without the empathy, you're going to be in that place of judging. You're not going to be able to open up to the possibility of healing. So approach.
So what does that look like? I think empathy is a word we don't really get. It's sort of nebulous. Is it... If I come to you, Brene Brown has a really great example of, like, your child come to you like, oh my God, I had this horrible day, my locker, blah, 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 and my books fell out and it was so embarrassing.
And somebody made fun of me and kicked my books.
And you say to your daughter, you know, well, I told you to dress differently and you wouldn't get that. Or, or you know, I have bigger problems. You don't know about bills to pay. That's not being empathic. And approaching it, that shame she might have experienced from her books falling out and people laughing at her, with empathy. So that heals it.
To approach it with empathy would be something like, so I understand that probably didn't feel very good. How do you feel about that? To let them then be able to own their own emotions and process them. So you can look at yourself with that lens, where you can allow yourself to process the emotions instead of judging yourself as they come up, and turn to thoughts of shame, of I am bad.
Or the shame of, in that instance, I might have shame as a mother coming up, and so I do my own response because now I'm in shame because my daughter is in shame. And so it's this cycle, instead of being empathic for myself and empathic for the person that I'm talking to. So that's shame. Which also, I think talking about trauma can be helpful, but I feel like trauma needs to be gotten out of the body. So working with a somatic healer, somatic experiencing, a sexological body worker, these are kinds of things that are going to help you release the shame and the trauma and the pain from the body. And that would be my #1 tip for you, is if you have these things and you're dealing with this barrier, to really find someone who can support you and help you through that, who can hold empathy, who knows how to help you get it out of your body, someone like a sexological body worker who could really help you through that.
And vet the people very carefully, because you
Yes.
don't want to get re-traumatized. You want to know their track record. You want to know that people have been to them and had success.
Yes, absolutely. All right, that wraps up our 7 barriers to passion and pleasure as part of our 52-week YouTube Sex Life Makeover Challenge. And we want you to like us.
We're likable, right?
And subscribe to us.
Uh-huh.
And
Wherever that is.
Instagram and Facebooks and all those kind of fun things. And leave us comments. You know, if you're experiencing shame, trauma, and pain, how can we support you? What are some ways? You know, we're interacting with people here. We really want to start a community and conversation around these things, which helps us release the shame.
Ways that you got over your shame and your trauma and your pain, those are also helpful for everybody in
For
this
the community.
So also come to Miss Jaya. We've got programs like Ignite Your Passion, where we dive into how you break through all of these barriers. So check us out at MissJaya.com, and we would love to engage with you.
And see you there. All right, until next time, fill your life with pleasure.